Okay, let's end this first half with a bang and do well here before you take your quiz. Your goal is to learn to solve equations by adding and subtracting fractions. They're back. So here's our warm-up. We've done all these before earlier this year, so this should be review. Remember the three. And you guys know how to finish that off. You're trying to get the variable alone, which in this case they're all x. And the third one is to get the variable alone, you have to do inverse operation. Okay. Make sure you remember those things to solve these four. Come back when you're done. And here are the answers that you should have gotten for them. Number 1, x equals 24. Number 2, x equals 13. Number 3, x equals 28. And number 4, x equals 56. So I found the number next to the variable. I moved it to the other side by doing the inverse operation. And I made sure what I did to one side, I did it to the other. So remember, to check your work, all you have to do is plug and chug. So I can plug 24 in for x. And as long as 24 minus 15 equals 9, that works. I can replace x and do 13 plus 21. That does give you 34. And so on and so on. All right, now that we got this back in our heads and we're all warmed up, let's keep her moving. All right, so we already kind of went through in the warm-up those three things you need to remember when solving an equation. You got to use the inverse operation both sides. What you do to one side, you got to do the other. And our whole goal is to get the variable all alone and what it's worth on the other side of the equal sign. So let's start out with our first problem here that we can go through together. And you are going to want to put this down in your notes. So our first equation that we're trying to solve for is x plus 5 3/5 equals 14. So we know that what we first have to do is find the inverse operation. Well, we can see we have addition here. So what's the opposite of addition? Subtraction. So we have to get the number that's next to the x out of there. So we got to move that roommate to the other room or the other place. So we're going to subtract 5 3/5 from both sides. What you do to one side, you got to do the other side of the equal sign. So now that leaves us with 14 minus 5 3/5. Now, just like we learned in the previous lesson, you can't do 14 minus 5 3/5 because we need a variable, or we need a fraction. So if we cross out the 14 and we use 5 as our common denominator, 14 becomes 13. And how do we show one whole? You add the denominator to the numerator. So 5 plus 0 is 5. So that's what we get down here. When you subtract 15 minus 5, you get 8, and 5 minus 3 is 2. So you get x equals 8 2/5. So to check to see if it works, all you have to do is plug and chug 8 2/5 back into the original, add it to 5 3/5, and if you get 14, it worked. And you can check to see if I'm correct by doing it on your own. And if you don't trust me, I expect to see you doing this work in your notebook. You won't offend me. All right, again, make sure you have this in your notes before moving on. Let's look at another problem. So here we have, let me erase this. There we go. Here we have 3 2/9 equaling x minus 4 1/3. So remember, to solve this, what we have to do is the inverse operation. So I see we have subtraction. So what's the opposite of subtraction? It's addition. And what we do to one side, we got to do to the other. So now if I rewrite this, I know x is all alone. But I'm going to rewrite 3 2/9 plus 4 1/3, and I can, 3 2/9 and 4 1/3. I realize I need to make a common denominator. So if I find the least common multiple of 3 and 9, I find out that it's actually 9. So I don't have to change anything here, but I do need to change something here. 3 times what gives us 9? That would be 3. What we do to the bottom, do to the top. 3 times 1 is 3. So now I'm ready. I'm just going to go ahead and add the whole numbers. 4 plus 3 is 7. And our numerators, 2 plus 3 gives us 5, and 9 stays the same. So that's how you get the answer to solving for, 7 and 5/9 equals x. I got to make sure to bring that down. And again, I can check my work by plugging and chugging. So if I look back at our original problem, I can put 7 and 5/9 in here and subtract it by 4 and 1/3, and I should get 3 and 2/9. Your choice if you need to write this one down or not. I just figured I'd show you 2 examples right away. Here's another problem for us to look at. So first thing you have to identify is the adding part. So we know that the opposite adding is subtracting. So let's subtract 7/12 from both sides. Now, the one thing you should notice is we have a 12 and we have a 6 as our numerators. We're going to have to get a common denominator, so why not use what we can tell, which is 6 goes into 12. So if we use that, we don't have to replace 12ths, but we will have to replace 12ths in 1/6. So 6 times what gives us 12? That's 2. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 2 times 1 is 2. Now, if you look here, we can't subtract 2 from 7. It's not going to work. So you know that we can borrow from the 6 to make it a 5. And we got to add 1 whole, so 12/12 to the 2. So basically just add 12 to 2. 12 plus 2 is 14/12. Okay, now we can subtract. 5 minus nothing is 5 for the whole number. 12 is our denominator. And 14 minus 7 is 7. So 5 and 7/12. Remember, to check if that works, plug and chug. Plug it back in and see if you get, with 5 and 7/12 plus 7/12, 6 and 1/6. All right. All right, I want you to watch me do one more before we do some practice problems. So again, identify it as a subtraction problem. Inverse of that is adding. So we're going to add 4/5 to both sides. So now we're just left with W equals. Now we have a 5 and we have a 10 as our denominators. We should go with 10 because 5 can go into 10. And then we don't have to change anything with 3 and 3/10. But what are we going to get here? 5 times what gives us 10? That'd be 2. So what you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 4 times 2 is 8. All right, add them together. 3 and no other whole number is 3. 8 plus 3 is 11/10. Now, we can't have 11/10. This is an improper fraction. So we have to see how many times 10 will go into 11, which will be once. When we subtract, we have a remainder of 1. So 1 and 1/10. Add that with the 3. So 3 and 11/10 also equals 4 and 1/10 in its simplest form. How do we check to see if that's correct? Again, plug and chug. All right, now that I've shown you 4 problems, it's time for you to do a couple on your own and show me how you can do without my help. All right, I have 6 problems up here, and I want you to try all 6. Try all 6, and come back when you're done. We'll see what you got as a correct answer. Good luck. And here are the answers you should have gotten. You can see for number 1, we had to subtract 2.5 from both sides, simplify it to get 4.5. For number 2, we added 5 and 1/9 to both sides. X equals 8 and 4/9 when simplified. For number 3, we had to subtract 4 and 1/8 to both sides. When simplified, you get 5 and 5/8. For 4, we had to subtract 1 and 1/5 from both sides. When we simplified it, we got 4 and 1/10. For 5, we had to subtract 3 and 2/5 from both sides. X equaled 4 and 1/10 when simplified. And finally, 6, we had to add 4 and 1/4 to both sides. And when we simplified that one, you got 12 and 19/20. So if you got all 6 correct, even if you got 4 out of 6 correct, give yourself a huge pat on the back because you are really doing a good job. let's make sure we look at some of these in word problem form. Here it says Linda's dog weighs 85 and 1/4 pounds. If Linda's dog weighs 17.5 pounds less than Ian's dog, how much does Ian's dog weigh? Well, we're basically trying to see how to subtract these two, but really you could add them together, and I'm sure some of you have already seen that. So 85 plus 17 gives you 102. When we make common denominators of fourths, you get 102 and 3/4 pounds. So you can copy this down if you want. I encourage it, but I'm not going to make you because you've written a lot of examples so far. Here is one I want you to try on your own, though. A tailor increased the length of the robe 2 1/4 inches. The new length of the robe is 60 inches. What was the original? Come back when you're done. Make sure you show your work. All right, so I found 57 3/4 inches the original length. Since we were adding on to it, I just added the two together, and I noticed I can't do 60 plus something, so I had to change and borrow one of those 60s and make it a fraction of 4/4. So that's why I had 59 and 4/4. Hopefully you got the same answer. Now it's time for you to do your box of thought. Only 2 questions to think about. And actually, I'll make it even easier for you. You only have to do the first question. Good luck. All right, so we saved some time in the box of thought. Here's your quiz. 5 questions. Do your best to show your work and your answers. Can't wait to see your results. And that's it. Good luck on the quiz next class period, because that's what you got coming up now that we finished all the adding and subtracting. After the quiz, you're going to have multiplying and dividing work. So that, I think, you'll find a little easier than the adding and subtracting. See you next time.